The massive chamber of the Galactic Council buzzed with fear. Through the giant viewing screen, Tom Miller watched another star system vanish into darkness. He sat quietly in his chair, marked with Earth's simple blue and green flag, while around him, the other alien representatives shouted and argued. "We must attack with full force," roared the representative of the Tiger Warriors, his orange fur standing on end. "Send in our entire fleet." "The Void Swarm has already destroyed 3 battle groups," responded the Crystal Queen, her crystalline form flashing with angry colors. "We lost 6,000 ships." Tom kept his eyes on the screen, studying the strange patterns of the dark mass that moved between the stars. The Void Swarm, as they called it, had appeared 3 months ago. Since then, it had consumed 12 star systems and defeated every fleet sent against it. "Perhaps," Tom said softly, but in the sudden quiet, everyone heard him, "we should study the enemy before rushing in." Laughter erupted around the chamber. The Tiger Warrior turned to him with a sneer. "Of course, the human suggests caution. When has your species ever done anything but hide and watch?" "The human is right," came a deep voice. Admiral Ben Walker, Earth's military representative, stood up. His weathered face showed no reaction to the mockery. "Our preliminary scans show patterns in the swarm's movement. If we could—" "Patterns," interrupted the Metal Lord, his chrome surface reflecting the emergency lights. "While you humans waste time with your studies and theories, whole worlds die. This is why you are considered the cowards of the galaxy. No warrior spirit, no courage." Tom shared a look with Admiral Walker. They had expected this reaction. For the past 50 years, since humans joined the Galactic Council, their careful and analytical approach had been mocked. Other species prided themselves on their warrior cultures, their readiness to fight. Humans were seen as weak because they preferred to study, plan, and prepare. "The Void Swarm has just entered the Centauri sector," announced the Council's eye. "Projected path indicates it will reach the Tiger Warrior home systems in 30 standard days." The Tiger Warrior's mighty roar shook the chamber. "Then we attack now. We will show these humans how true warriors fight." Tom watched as the Tiger Warrior fleet assembled on the screen. 10,000 ships, their most powerful armada, moved to intercept the Void Swarm. The council chamber fell silent as the battle began. It lasted less than an hour. The Void Swarm moved in ways that seemed random at first, but Tom could see it, the subtle patterns, the way it reacted to certain attacks. He took careful notes while others watched in horror as the mighty Tiger Warrior fleet was torn apart. When the last ship fell silent, the Tiger Warrior representative slumped in his seat. His proud warrior culture, with 5,000 years of military history, had just been defeated. "Earth offers sanctuary to any refugees," Tom announced, standing up. "And we are beginning a detailed analysis of the swarm's behavior. Any species willing to join our research effort is welcome." "Research?" The Crystal Queen's voice dripped with scorn. "Your cowardice disgusts me. We will show you true courage." As she ordered her own fleet to prepare for battle, Tom turned to Admiral Walker. "How long until the analysis team is ready?" "Captain Jane Reed is assembling them now," Walker replied quietly. "We've been recording every encounter, running simulations. There's definitely something about the way the swarm moves, something we can use." Tom nodded, watching as more species pledged their forces to a massive joint attack. None of them wanted to listen to the cowardly humans and their careful approach. They would learn the hard way, as they always did. "Send word to Earth," Tom said. "Tell them to begin Protocol Shield. If everyone else wants to rush in and die, we'll do what humans have always done." "What's that?" asked a young aide. Tom's eyes remained fixed on the screen, where the Crystal Queen's fleet was now moving into position. "We'll study. We'll plan. We'll prepare. And when everyone else has failed, we'll step up and show them that true courage isn't about who dies first. It's about making sure we all survive." Behind him, the council erupted in another round of arguments and battle plans. But Tom knew the truth. Humanity's greatest strength had always been labeled as its greatest weakness. Soon, they would all understand why. Captain Jane Reed stood before the massive wall of screens in Earth's Defense Command Center, her eyes fixed on the swirling patterns of the Void Swarm. Behind her, 50 of Earth's best analysts worked at their stations, each studying different aspects of the enemy that had thrown the galaxy into chaos. "Look at this movement here," Mark Thompson called out, pointing to a particular section of the display. The military analyst had barely slept in 3 days, but his eyes were sharp. Every time they encounter a large energy signature, they split into these smaller groups. Jane walked over to his station, watching as he played the footage again. The Void Swarm, a mass of dark, shifting shapes, encountered a Crystal Queen battleship. Just before destroying it, the swarm broke apart in a distinct pattern. "Run it against the Tiger Warrior battle," she ordered. Mark quickly pulled up the footage from the devastating defeat they had witnessed in the council chamber. The same pattern appeared. The swarm split into smaller units when facing large energy weapons. "They're distributing the damage," Lisa Cooper said from her research station, "like water breaking around a rock. That's why the big weapons aren't working." Jane nodded slowly. "So brute force makes them harder to hit. What about the smaller ships?" They studied more footage, watching battles where smaller scout ships had encountered the swarm. The patterns were different there. The swarm would cluster together, becoming a bigger target, but also more powerful. "They adapt," Mark said, excitement creeping into his voice. "But they always adapt the same way. It's not random at all." The room buzzed with energy as more patterns emerged. The swarm moved differently in different situations, but always following the same rules. Rules that could be predicted. A loud alarm interrupted their work. On the main screen, a message flashed from the Galactic Council. The combined fleet of 5 species had just engaged the Void Swarm. "Put it on screen," Jane ordered. "Let's see if we can spot more patterns." The battle was brutal. Thousands of ships from different species attacked together, each using their most powerful weapons. The Crystal Queen's energy beams, the Metal Lord's plasma cannons, and 3 other species' best weapons all fired at once. "They're making it worse," Lisa whispered, watching as the swarm split into countless smaller units, becoming nearly impossible to hit while destroying ship after ship. "Look," Mark pointed at a small section of the battle. "That fighter squadron, they're having better luck." Jane zoomed in on the area he indicated. A group of small fighters had broken away from the main fleet, attacking with quick, short bursts rather than sustained fire. They weren't doing major damage, but they were surviving. "Track their energy signatures," she ordered. The computers quickly analyzed the data. "Small energy bursts," Lisa reported. "The swarm stays together when facing them. They're actually hitting their target." Jane immediately opened a channel to Admiral Walker, who was still at the Galactic Council. "Admiral, we found something. The swarm reacts to energy signatures. Big weapons make them split up, but small, coordinated attacks." She trailed off as she watched the combined fleet retreat in defeat. Nearly all the large ships had been destroyed, but most of the smaller fighters had survived. "Send me everything," Walker replied. "I'll try to convince them to listen." "But after this defeat, they'll have to listen now," Jane said firmly. "We've started to crack their code. Mark, start working on battle simulations using small ships with coordinated attack patterns. Lisa, I want defensive formations based on the swarm's splitting behavior." As her team jumped into action, Jane looked back at the main screen. The Void Swarm was moving again, consuming another star system. But now they had something they didn't have before: understanding. "This is how humans fight," she said to herself. "Not with blind courage, but with knowledge. And now we know enough to start fighting back." Behind her, the screens filled with data, simulations, and patterns. While the rest of the galaxy mourned another defeat, Earth's analysts worked through the night, turning their greatest weakness, their cautious, analytical nature, into their greatest weapon against an enemy that no one else had taken the time to understand. The massive underground facility beneath the Rocky Mountains hummed with activity. 3 weeks had passed since the combined fleet's defeat, and humanity had not wasted a single minute. "Run the simulation again," Captain Jane Reed ordered, watching as holographic ships moved through the combat scenario. Next to her, Admiral Walker stood with his arms crossed, studying the results. The simulation showed a new formation of small ships moving in tight, coordinated groups. As the simulated void swarm approached, the ships broke into precise patterns, firing short, controlled bursts of energy. 92% survival rate, Mark Thompson reported from his station. "That's our best run yet." In another part of the facility, Lisa Cooper supervised the modification of Earth's defense fleet. Workers swarmed over the ships, replacing the large energy cannons with smaller, rapid-fire weapons. "The power distribution is perfect now," Lisa said into her communicator. "Small bursts, just like in nature. Like a school of fish confusing a predator." The Tiger Warrior representative watched from a viewing platform, his proud features twisted in confusion. After their fleet's destruction, some aliens had finally started listening to the humans. "You make your weapons smaller?" he asked, disbelief in his voice. "How can this defeat an enemy that destroy our strongest ships?" "Watch," Jane said, starting another simulation. This time, the display showed how the swarm's splitting behavior could be used against it. When your big ships attacked, you gave them exactly what they needed to break apart and become harder to hit. But our way. The simulation showed the new human tactics. Small ships moving in fluid formations, their modest weapons firing in carefully timed patterns. The void swarm stayed clustered, trying to present a larger target to the small attacks, but this made it vulnerable to coordinated strikes. "You're not trying to overpower them," the Tiger Warrior said slowly, understanding dawning in his eyes. "You're tricking them into staying together." "Finally," muttered Mark, but not quietly enough. The Tiger Warrior's sharp ears caught it, and he growled softly. Admiral Walker stepped in smoothly. "We've also developed new shields," he said, leading them to another testing area. "Instead of trying to block all damage with one strong shield, we use layers of weaker shields. When the swarm splits up, the layers split their attacks." They watched as engineers tested the new shield system. Like pages in a book, each layer could move independently, dispersing energy rather than trying to stop it completely. "But this takes so much time," the Tiger Warrior protested. "The Void Swarm has already destroyed 20 star systems. While you prepare, more will die." Jane turned to him, her voice firm. "And how many died in direct attacks?" "Sometimes the fastest way to win a war is to take time to understand your enemy first." An alarm sounded, but not one of danger. "Final fleet modifications complete," Lisa's voice announced over the speakers. "All ships are equipped with the new weapons and shield systems." "Begin crew training," Jane ordered. "I want every pilot to run at least 50 simulations before we attempt real combat." The Tiger Warrior shook his head. "My people would never have such patience. That's why we're still alive to help you," Admiral Walker said quietly. "Sometimes courage means doing what's hard, like waiting, learning, and preparing, instead of what feels brave." As if to emphasize his point, another message came in from the Galactic Council. 3 more species had attempted attacks on the Void Swarm. All had failed. "How much longer?" the Tiger Warrior asked, his voice heavy with the weight of lost warriors. Jane checked the training schedules and preparation timetables on her tablet. 2 more weeks. We do this right, or we don't do it at all." She looked up at the main screen, where the Void Swarm's current position blinked ominously. They were preparing to attack another star system. 2 weeks, she repeated firmly. "And then we'll show the galaxy that humanity's greatest weakness, our caution, is about to become the greatest weapon they've ever seen." The bridge of the Earth Defense Force flagship Prudence was silent except for the soft beeping of instruments. Captain Jane Reed stood at the command station, watching as her fleet of 500 small ships moved into position. "All ships report ready," Mark Thompson said from his tactical station. "Combat simulations running at 98% success rate." Through the main viewport, they could see the Void Swarm approaching the colony world of New Eden. Unlike previous encounters, they weren't rushing to meet it. "Remember your training." Jane's voice carried across all channels to the fleet. "Small groups, coordinated attacks, just like we practiced. No heroes today. We work together." The Galactic Council observation ships hung back at a safe distance. Representatives from 12 species watched, many still skeptical of the human approach. "The swarm has detected us," Lisa Cooper reported from her science station. "They're changing course to intercept." Jane nodded calmly. "Execute Pattern Alpha. Groups 1 through 5, begin your approach." The human fleet split into smaller squadrons, each moving in flowing patterns that almost looked like a dance. The Void Swarm, a massive dark cloud of shifting matter, moved to meet them. "Energy signatures minimal," Mark reported. "Small weapons only, just as planned." The first shots were fired. Quick, sharp bursts of energy from the human ships, nothing like the massive energy beams other species had used. As predicted, the swarm stayed together, forming a larger target to deal with the small attacks. "Pattern holding," Lisa announced. "The swarm is behaving exactly as our simulations showed." Jane allowed herself a small smile. "Groups 6 through 10, begin your attack runs. Remember, timing is everything." More squadrons moved in, their attacks perfectly coordinated. When one group pulled back, another moved in, never giving the swarm a large enough energy signature to trigger its splitting behavior. On the Council observation ships, the alien representatives watched in amazement. "They're actually hitting it," the Tiger Warrior whispered. "Their tiny weapons are causing damage." Admiral Walker, standing among the aliens, nodded. "Death by 1,000 cuts, as we say on Earth. No single blow needs to be powerful if you know exactly where and when to strike." The battle continued. Human ships moved like schools of fish, weaving in and out, their small weapons firing in precise patterns. When the swarm tried to adapt, the humans adapted faster, switching to pre-planned formations they had practiced hundreds of times. "First confirmed kill." Mark's voice was steady but excited. A section of the swarm just disappeared. The alien observers erupted in surprised chatter. They had never seen any part of the swarm actually die before. "Continue the pattern," Jane ordered. "Don't get excited. Don't get cocky. Stick to the plan." Hour after hour, the human fleet maintained their disciplined attack. Ships that took damage withdrew in organized rotations, their layered shields having protected them from serious harm. Fresh squadrons took their place, maintaining the constant pressure. Finally, after 6 hours of continuous combat, the remaining Void Swarm broke off and retreated. The colony was saved. "Damage report," Jane called out. 12 ships with minor damage, no casualties," Mark reported, his voice filled with quiet pride. "We did it, Captain. We actually did it." The Council observation ships erupted in celebration. Species that had mocked humans for their caution were now calling for their help, begging to learn their methods. "This is just the beginning," Jane said to her crew. "Now we teach others, build bigger fleets using these tactics. The swarm can be beaten, not by blind courage, but by careful study and disciplined action." Admiral Walker's voice came over the comm. "Well done, Captain Reed. The Council is quite interested in hearing more about humanity's approach now." Jane looked at the stars where the swarm had retreated. "Tell them we'll be happy to teach. But first, we analyze this battle, improve our tactics, and prepare for the next encounter. That's the human way." "The coward's way?" asked a council member, perhaps trying to make a joke. "No," Jane replied firmly. "The smart way. The way that keeps people alive. And now, the way that wins." The training center on Mars buzzed with activity as ships from 20 different species practiced the new combat formations. Admiral Walker watched from the control tower as squadrons of alien vessels attempted to mirror the precise movements of their human instructors. The Metal Lords are struggling with the concept of retreating to regroup, Mark Thompson said, reviewing the latest simulation results. They keep trying to push forward, even when their shields are down. Old habits die hard, Admiral Walker replied. He activated the communication channel. Metal Lord Squadron, remember, a tactical retreat is not surrender. It's part of the larger battle plan. In the simulator room below, Captain Jane Reed worked with a group of alien commanders. The massive holographic display showed recordings of the successful battle at New Eden. Notice how each group times their attacks, she explained, pointing to the coordinated movements. It's like a dance. When one group pulls back, another moves in. The key is patience, interrupted the Tiger Warrior commander, nodding slowly. We must fight with patience. Lisa Cooper entered the room, carrying new data from the latest Void Swarm encounters. The swarm is already trying to adapt to our tactics, she announced. They're attempting to break apart even with smaller energy signatures. Then we adapt too, Jane said firmly. She turned to the alien commanders. This is why we continue to study, to train, to improve. Victory once doesn't mean victory always. The Crystal Queen's representative raised her shimmering hand. But surely now that we know the weakness, we can simply. No, Jane cut in firmly. There is no simply in this fight. Every shortcut costs lives. Every skipped practice puts your crews at risk. In the training area outside, human instructors worked with alien crews, teaching them how to modify their ships' weapons and shields. Some species struggled with the idea of making their weapons less powerful, but the results were hard to argue with. Watch your power output, a human engineer called to a group of Tiger Warrior technicians. Remember, smaller bursts, more precise targeting. Quality over quantity. Admiral Walker walked down to the main briefing room, where representatives from more species arrived each day, seeking to learn the human methods. The room that had once mocked Earth's cautious nature was now filled with attentive faces. The swarm has changed course, he announced, bringing up the latest star charts. They're avoiding systems where ships using our tactics are deployed. For the first time, they're retreating from us. A murmur of excitement ran through the room, but Jane quickly raised her hand. This doesn't mean we've won. It means they're adapting, learning. We need to be ready for their counter-strategy. Always more preparation, grumbled one alien commander, but his tone was respectful now, not mocking. Yes, Jane replied simply. Always more preparation. That's why we're still alive to have this conversation. As if to emphasize her point, news arrived from a distant system. A species that had refused human training had attempted to fight the swarm their own way. Their fleet was gone. We've modified the simulator programs, Mark announced. New scenarios based on the swarm's latest behavior patterns. All crews need to run through them at least 50 times. Some of the alien commanders looked ready to protest, but the Tiger Warrior leader stood up. Then we begin now. My people will not rest until we match the human standards. Admiral Walker smiled slightly. Coming from a species that had once led the mockery of human caution, this was a significant change. Training begins in 10 minutes, Jane announced. Remember, every simulation you run, every pattern you practice, every detail you perfect. These aren't signs of cowardice. They're investments in survival. As the commanders filed out to their training stations, Lisa approached with more data to analyze. The work never stopped. The learning never ended. But now, the galaxy was beginning to understand that this human weakness was actually humanity's greatest gift to them all. The wisdom to know that true victory required more than courage alone. 3,000 ships hung in the darkness of space near the Arcturus system. It was the largest fleet ever assembled, but unlike previous massive gatherings, this one was different. Every ship had been modified with human designs. Every crew had completed their training. Every captain understood the plan. Captain Jane Reeves stood on the bridge of the Prudence, now the fleet's command ship. On her tactical display, she could see the organized squadrons: humans, tiger warriors, crystal queens, metal lords, and 15 other species, all working together. "The Void Swarm has entered the system," Mark Thompson reported. "They'd grown, almost twice the size we've seen before." Admiral Walker's voice came through the command channel. "They've learned they're vulnerable. They're trying to overwhelm us with numbers." "Good thing we planned for this," Jane replied calmly. She opened the fleet-wide channel. "All ships, this is Captain Reed. Execute Formation Delta. Remember your training. Trust your squadrons. No heroes today. We win together or not at all." The massive fleet broke into smaller groups, each moving with precision that would have been impossible just months ago. The Tiger Warrior ships, once known for charging straight into battle, now moved in elegant patterns alongside human vessels. "Swarm is responding," Lisa Cooper announced from her science station. "They're trying to split early, before we even attack." Jane nodded. This was expected. Phase 2, begin now. At her command, the Crystal Queen ships activated their modified energy weapons. Instead of their usual powerful beams, they fired thousands of tiny energy pulses in precise patterns. The swarm, caught off guard by this new tactic, began to cluster together. "Metal Lord squadrons, you're up," Jane ordered. The chrome ships of the Metal Lords, their weapons reduced to quarter power but quadrupled in number, began their attack runs. They moved like schools of fish, darting in and out, their coordinated strikes forcing the swarm to maintain its clustered formation. "First breach in swarm defenses," Mark called out. "Section 7 is destabilizing." The battle continued, hour after hour. When one squadron needed to recharge their shields, another smoothly took its place. There were no heroic last stands, no glorious solo charges, just precise, coordinated teamwork. "The swarm is trying something new," Lisa warned suddenly. "Energy readings are spiking." The dark mass of the swarm began to pulse with strange light. It was attempting to generate its own energy field to break up the attackers' formations. "They really do learn," Jane muttered. Then louder, "All ships, execute contingency plan Theta." This was what they had trained for. The fleet smoothly shifted formation, breaking into even smaller groups while maintaining their coordinated attack patterns. As the swarm's energy field expanded, the smaller squadrons slipped through its gaps. "It's working." Mark's voice was excited but controlled. "The swarm can't adapt fast enough to counter all the small groups." The battle reached its peak. Every squadron moved like parts of a giant machine, each doing its part. The Tiger Warriors provided covering fire, while Crystal Queen ships probed for weaknesses. Metal Lord vessels struck at vulnerable points, while human ships coordinated the overall attack. Finally, after 12 hours of continuous combat, something unprecedented happened. The Void Swarm didn't just retreat, it began to break apart. "Multiple sections of the swarm are losing cohesion," Lisa reported, her voice filled with carefully controlled excitement. They're actually falling apart." The coordinated attacks continued, precise and relentless, until the last portions of the swarm either dispersed or were destroyed. For the first time in history, a Void Swarm had been completely defeated. As the fleet regrouped, Admiral Walker's voice came through again. "Damage report. 87 ships damaged, 12 lost," Mark reported. Compared to the thousands lost in previous battles, the Tiger Warrior commander finished. "The humans were right. Patience and preparation cost less than courage alone." Jane looked at her tactical display, where the combined fleet was already moving into defensive positions, just as they trained. No celebration yet, no victory parades. They were already preparing for the next encounter. "The swarm will be back," she said to the fleet. "They'll be stronger, and they'll have new tricks. But so will we, because that's what humans taught the galaxy. The greatest victory isn't winning one battle. It's learning how to win them all. The great chamber of the Galactic Council looked very different now. Where once proud warrior species had boasted of their battle prowess, now stood leaders who had learned a deeper truth about strength and courage. Tom Miller, Earth's ambassador, sat in his usual chair marked with the simple blue and green flag. But this time, no one was laughing at humanity's cautious nature. Instead, they were here to honor it. The last known void swarm was destroyed yesterday, announced the Council President. Using the human combat doctrine, our combined fleets have eliminated every trace of the threat that once seemed unstoppable. Captain Jane Reeve and Admiral Walker stood beside Tom, along with Mark Thompson and Lisa Cooper. They had all been called to receive the Council's highest honor, the Star of Galactic Unity. It was the first time humans had ever been given this award. The Tiger Warrior representative, now one of humanity's strongest supporters, stepped forward to speak. My people have a saying, the strongest warrior charges first. But humans taught us a new truth. The wisest warrior makes sure everyone comes home. Jane looked at the statistical displays floating above the council chamber. The numbers told the story clearly. After adopting human tactics, fleet losses had dropped by 95%. More ships, more crews, more lives had been saved than ever before. We call them cowards, the Crystal Queen said, her crystalline form glowing with emotion. We mocked their careful nature, their endless preparation, their refusal to rush into battle. But they were not afraid. They were wise. And that wisdom saved us all. Admiral Walker stepped forward to address the council. Humans have always been different, he said. We evolved on a world that taught us hard lessons. We learned that the strongest creature isn't always the one that survives. Sometimes it's the one that takes time to think, to plan, to prepare. The Metal Lord, his chrome surface now decorated with the smaller weapons that had proved so effective, added his voice. My people have already begun redesigning our military academy. We will teach both the old ways and the human way. Balance, as Earth has shown us, is strength. Tom stood up, looking around at the changed council. Earth thanks you for this honor, he said. But the real victory isn't in defeating the Void Swarm. It's in what we all learn together. That courage comes in many forms. The displays change, showing recordings from the training centers on Mars. Species that had once been bitter rivals now work together, learning from each other, combining their strengths with human tactical wisdom. The galaxy is changing, Jane said, stepping up beside Tom. The next threat we face, and there will be one, won't find us divided by pride and tradition. They'll find us united, patient, and prepared. Lisa brought up new data on the screens. We're already seeing improvements in civilian technology from what we learned. Better shields for merchant ships, more efficient energy distribution in colonies. When you stop trying to overpower problems and start trying to understand them, everything becomes possible. Mark finished. The council chamber erupted in applause. Species that had once seen humans as weak now stood in respect. The Tiger Warrior commander approached Jane after the ceremony. My youngest son starts his training next week, he said. He asked to join the Human Tactical Academy instead of our traditional warrior school. 10 years ago, I would have been ashamed. Now I'm proud. Admiral Walker smiled. What changed? I learned what humans knew all along, the Tiger Warrior replied. That true courage isn't about being fearless. It's about being smart enough to admit there's a better way. As the celebration continued, Tom looked out at the stars through the council chamber's massive window. Somewhere out there, new challenges waited. But now the galaxy was ready. Not because they had bigger weapons or stronger ships, but because humans had taught them something more valuable. They had learned that wisdom could be greater than strength, that patience could be sharper than any blade, and that what some had called cowardice was actually the highest form of courage, the courage to find a better way.